John, thank you very much for the invite to a most wonderful house. I must admit, I've only been up the 2 set of stairs and into this room. What a fantastic house. How long have you had this fantastic house?
Well, it's been a bit of a labour of love because I bought it about 10 years ago. Ran charity balls in it for about the first 3 years.
Yeah.
Then started thinking about how I was going to renovate it. The planning of the renovation was about another 3 years, and the renovation was 3 years. Actually, more than that, 4 years. So it's been quite a labour of love. But of course, as you can see now, what we've produced is something that's very magnificent.
Well, it's fantastic, and it has been cited as the most expensive property in the UK. So for those who are now tuning in saying, what are we talking about? So John Caudwell, self-made billionaire, grew up in the Midlands. I'm from Birmingham, so you just up the road, Stoke-on-Trent, Staffordshire. Of course, you're known for pioneering telecommunications, and you exited in 2006, and apparently you were selling 26 phones a minute on exit. And of course, you keep yourself now rather busy, lots of business ventures, but of course, and we'll chat about Caudwell Children a bit later on. So thank you once again, John. So one of the first questions I ask people, and certainly people like yourself, why write a book now? Why now? I mean, you've been so successful over such a long period. What made you decide to write a fantastic book? And I've read it, we'll go through it, Love, Pain and Money, The Making of a Billionaire. Why now, John?
Very simple, actually, because people have been asking me to write a book for probably as long as 40 years, and I never had the time. Then the pandemic struck, and suddenly I'd got no parties, no birthdays, no travel, no holidays, no charity balls. A big part of my life was removed. I still got my businesses to manage, but even those to an extent were curtailed by the pandemic. So suddenly I had time, and I thought, wow, what an opportunity to turn this fiasco into something positive. And the positive thing was manyfold, actually, not just the book, but the book was one of the things to come out of that.
And it's a beautifully written book, by the way, John. We'll go through some of the stuff in there. It really was. At times, it was quite difficult to read because of some of the depth you went about your feelings, and we'll catch up on all of that. But in particular, entrepreneurs sometimes are made by the environment within which they grow up. So we've heard generations and generations building on the success of other generations, and of course you're affected by your parents and your grandparents. How did they fit into your early childhood, and how did that affect what you ended up doing?
Well, it's a good question. I'm not sure there is much effect.
Okay.
That may not be true, because if we sort of explore the detail of that, my grandmother, who died when I was 11, but we lived with until I was 11, she filled my head full of stories about successful Caudwell generations gone.
Okay.
That were doctors, business people. In fact, there's mills in Derbyshire still. They're museums now, Caudwell Mills. And there was a Caudwell bakery, and there were Caudwells in South Africa who were big farmers. There's all sorts of Caudwells historically. And all of this skipped my family, who were, I wouldn't say poor, but really at the bottom end of the chain. And we lived in a terrace house with my grandmother, and my grandmother filled my head full of this stuff. So maybe that had a subconscious effect. I was never quite aware that it made a difference, but maybe it did, because there was all this success historically that had skipped my family. So that's one part maybe. And I think the other part, if I was affected in any way, I think it was by my father being sort of quite angry, quite unfair, and not treating me very well, and not giving me the love that a father should give his son. And I think that shaped my thinking also about being fair in everything that I did in life, not just with family, but in business. And just fairness was a crucial thing. And I would probably say there's many words you could use to describe me, but the one I really want to be known for in terms of qualities would be fairness.
And didn't I read somewhere that your mother also insisted that you looked after people? There was an instance where I think you were on holiday or somewhere and you were getting people to haggle over the price, and your mother and
Yeah.
you brought the price down.
No, this was the entrepreneurial,
Yeah.
the entrepreneur in me.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be visualised as a bit mean, really, to be honest, because we were in an African village and they were all trying to sell tablecloths. They were a very poor people,
Yeah.
and it was a bit. I think it was a bit cruel, perhaps. It was not meant to be. It was sport and fun, and I got them all auctioning downwards with their tablecloths.
Yeah.
And I got the price really low because I'd go down from one price to another. And my mother was horrified. I eventually bought the tablecloth, which was the cheapest. But what I did do was gave them the original starting price. So I think it was a bit of sport. Mind you, in that part of the world, like in the Indian culture, people love a haggle.
They do.
They love the game.
They do.
So perhaps it wasn't me, and especially because I ended up giving them the start price. But my mother, not knowing what I was doing, was a bit disgusted with me. She said, "John, these people have got to live. They've got to eat." And
Yeah.
of course, I knew that, and I was never planning to. The money was very low. It was very small money. I was never going to take that lowest price. But it was just, I'd never done it before. I'd never set up a reverse haggle. Where I got auctions always start there and go up.
Low and go up.
So starting one that goes up there and goes down, because I've got all this captive audience of people who want to sell to me, it was a bit of fun. And I think they enjoyed it, and especially when I gave the lady who was the winner, I gave her the full price back again.
Wow. Now, we're always been told if you're going to get somewhere, you have to have a dream. You have to go for something. And I did read somewhere about a Rolls Royce and Stoke-on-Trent and giving fivers out and helping your local community. Was that potentially the dream that set you? So that again was from young. You sort of saw. That's what I'm. Is that part of why you ended up doing what you did without realising?
Yeah, absolutely. That dream of being in my father's favourite car that was the best in the world, the Rolls Royce, it was the epitome of being successful and wealthy. I didn't know what that was as a 7-year-old. And giving £5 notes out to poor people was the charitable bit, although I didn't really understand it was charity. I don't know why I had the dream. I don't know why I visualised that, but I did, and that lived with me forever. And it was my sort of destiny that I had no idea how to achieve. None. Not a clue how to achieve, from the terry streets of Stoke-on-Trent with no inspiration. You went to work in the pits or the coal mines, or the potteries or the steelworks. That's what you did, or Michelin Tire Company. You didn't go and build a business and make a success of your life. So there was no inspiration, but I had this sort of destiny that was locked into my brain. And the first part of that, the making money, was the bit that really was the essential bit, because without that you get nowhere. And I lost sight completely of the charity bit while I was focused on trying to make a success of my life. The charity didn't form into that destiny at all for a good number of years while I fought to succeed. As I started to succeed more and more and more, then this second part of the dream came back to me that, well, what about the charity piece? You've done nothing. You've done nothing. You might have given a few pounds out here and there, but you've done nothing. And so as I made more wealth, I gained more desire to fulfill the other part of the dream. I don't think I even thought of it like that. I think it was all subconscious. I think it was all just subconscious that I'd got to do this charity piece. I don't think I related it back. At the time, I don't think I thought, oh, it was my dream to be charitable. I just thought, oh, these people need helping, I need to do it. It's only subsequently, when people have asked me how it all came about, that I've sort of connected all the dots.
And they say in order for you to get your dream, other people have to buy into your dream. And I was reading the role of Kate, your wife, and how she played a role and sort of accepted when you said, look, I think we're going to go and do this or this. That's important, isn't it, that the people around you buy into that dream, because otherwise it becomes quite difficult to reach if other people, to take them along. And so I'm thinking in particular about your brother, your younger brother, for him to follow you into those various businesses. He must have followed your dream and understood the dream. And what was it like working with your brother?
Well, there's lots of questions there, but let's deal with Kate first. I think anybody that hasn't got a supportive wife in business is going to be in real trouble, because the will, without doubt, for most people become traumatic situations where they've got to work like fury in order to save the day, or if they don't fight hard enough, they'll lose the day. The business will go under and they'll end up with liquidation, maybe even lose the home. So you've got to be prepared to fight tooth and nail as required. And for that you need a supportive house, a supportive family. And my wife, Kate, was extremely supportive and never put me under any stress. I mean, she wanted to see more of me, but it couldn't be. It had to be the way it was, and she accepted it, and there was never any stress or pressure. Same with my children, really. And I always remember a lovely sentiment and emotion I had. It's not in the book. I've just thought about it. When I came home, it was when I was running the car sales site, and I came home one day, and it was the Christmas period when car sales fell off a cliff. And we'd had a terrible November and December. And things were really bad. It was terrible weather. All the cars were frozen up. It was dreadful. We were spending all the time just trying to survive, trying to create some interest, and it wasn't there. It was dreadful. We were working all the hours you could ever imagine. And I came home to Kate one day and I was a bit despairing. And I said to Kate, if this continues, we're going to be in a bit of trouble. I said, it's really quite difficult. I don't think we're going to go under, but it's tough. It's really tough, and we're going to have to really economise on everything. Coming up to Christmas, that's not a great message to you.
Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't realise anybody was listening, but my little daughter, who at the time, I can't remember what her age was, maybe 8, 9, came to me, and she said, "Daddy, if it's any help to you, I can give you my 10p pocket money back." I thought, well, firstly, what a lovely heart, a lovely gesture. But secondly, I need a lot more than 10p pocket money returning. And but that was a wonderful moment, born out of a bit of darkness.
But isn't it interesting? You've just you're smiling about it now, but you actually had the support structure around you, which gave you the motivation the day after to keep going, knowing that support structure is. So we had Sridhar Arora, runs a fantastic chain of hotels, and he said, right at the outset, he was ambitious. He said to his wife, "This is the goal. You're going to have to accept that I'm not going to be here, that I'm going to be doing this, and if you can then do that, that and that." And he said, because there was that supportive structure, he was able to go full health and succeeded in doing what he wanted to do. So
I'll find that out first hand soon, because I'm having dinner with him very shortly.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm going to his ball.
Okay.
So I'll get that story first. But you do need that support, because if you've got all the stress of a business that you're really struggling to keep on top of, and then you come home and you've got pressure from your wife or your kids, it's unbearable. It would be unbearable. I've never had it, but I know it would be unbearable, because you'd be really torn and in difficult situations. So
because it can be a lonely place, can't it? Being an entrepreneur can be a really lonely place.
Yeah. I mean, most of my life I've been pretty much the decision maker on my own. It was wonderful to have my brother in, which was the other part of your question, because he was very similar-minded to me for most of the business life. We were in sync, really in sync with each other. He was very talented, very, very talented. Eventually, it came to an end because my vision was endless and his had a limitation to it and valued more time at home and to do his hobbies, and so when he was 40 he left the business and I was left on my own. It was a very sad day actually, it was extremely sad. I'd seen it coming for a year or two because I saw him increasingly not overly happy with this gigantic business that we were growing. It was becoming very corporate, still with an entrepreneurial flair, still with that entrepreneurialism, but there was a lot more corporate aspects to it. And he didn't really like it, he lost interest in it. And as he lost interest in it, I became quite saddened about it because I valued him immensely in the business, not just because of his help in growing it, but because he was my brother. And anyway, eventually the day came out and I had to let him go, you know, and he went and we got on with life and carried on. And it was wonderful having him in the business. Now that said, people say to me, should I employ family in the business? I always say no.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely not, because most of your family won't perform as you need them to, and when they don't perform, and you've got to start disciplining them, and it maybe even remove them from the business, not only does it disturb your business, and you might have been too soft on them anyway because they're family, but it also disrupts your family life, and you don't want to be disrupting your family life. And what I would say to people, to listeners who've got a view on this, if it works, it's amazing, because if the person that's your family that's in the business is a good person, you've got somebody trustworthy, reliable, and passionate about the same things as you. But if it goes wrong, and probably most of the time, more times than not, it will go wrong rather than go right, then you've got the misery of somebody in the business that's your family, and it disrupts your family life as well. And it might even cause brothers or relation not to speak to each other and have very difficult times. So I would never advise it, you know, recruit from the outside world, and if you've got a difficult, it's still a difficult position to manage when you remove somebody from the business. It's still quite difficult because they often won't accept that it's their failure to perform as expected. They'll try and blame the boss, the business or something, because it's a face saver, so they'll always leave trying to blame somebody. But I think you just need to let people lead the business in the kindest way possible, and that's very difficult.
Before I come on to why mobile phones, you did talk about growing and more corporate-y. What's your advice here? How do you keep, as you're expanding and scaling, how do you keep that entrepreneurial DNA within the business? Because you're at the top, you're employing all of these people and they're sort of getting bigger and bigger and bigger. How can you, that's difficult.
Well, the answer is that you can't completely. The bigger you get, the more diluted your message becomes.
Yeah.
And it's inevitable. You get more managers who don't really quite get it. You get more and more of those people and less of your own culture going through. But one of the ways you do it, of course, is regular management meetings, regular coaching, and actually quite a strong method of management where you don't put up with politics within the business, you don't put up with bad behaviour, you don't put up with anything unethical. You actually have a very, very stringent set of values that you drive through the business. You can't maintain it like you did when there was 50 of you, but you can still drive it through and hold people accountable and make sure things are done in the correct way. But it will become definitely a diluted version of what you started off with.
Talking about entrepreneurs, you did quite a bit before you ended up in phones. You ran a garage, selling cars with your brother. Before that, groceries, and before that, you managed to convince your manager, look, I need to go and buy this house, so can you put me into this job? So it appears to the outside that you were quite entrepreneurial in the way you were growing up and thinking. Are entrepreneurs born, or do you think now, having scaled, you can teach someone to be an entrepreneur?
Everybody at the top of the game, no matter what it is born. And then they work like fury and they maybe get to the top. whether it's a 100-meter sprinter, whether it's a businessman, or whether it's a musician. It's all a God-given talent that you're born with, and then you make the best of it. There's those people that don't make the best of it, don't work hard enough, and they don't succeed at the level they could have done. There's other people that weren't given that immense talent, but work like fury and develop a talent. So what I would say is, if you want to be the very pinnacle, the very, very top, you've got to be born with it and then work like fury to develop it, and be so analytical of your own faults, your own failings, and strive like fury for perfection, to do the very, very best you can in every way, sense and shape. But if you're not born with that, but you work very, very hard and you apply your brain, you're still going to be very successful, just not quite the top. And if you liken that to the 100-meter sprinter, you know, to be Usain Bolt, you've got to be born Usain Bolt.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that somebody who's not born Usain Bolt, a lot less talented, can't get very high up in their performance and really do a great 100 meters. So you can still be great, you're just not going to be the very top.
So when you started on your entrepreneur journey, just you and your brother, quite simple. Took on a few people, became quite simple. But as you then went into mobiles, and you grew and you grew and you grew, suddenly you had to change. I would have thought you would have to become, use the word coaching a few seconds ago. Is there a big difference between just being an entrepreneur but actually being an entrepreneur transitions to becoming a leader? Almost there is that transition. Some people never scale because they're not able to make that transition, if that sort of makes sense. And did you find that difficult, transitioning from an entrepreneur running a small thing to a big, huge, humongous £1 billion empire, and having to think totally different about coaching people rather than being in the minutia? Was that easy, or was that quite difficult?
Well, it's a very good question, very poignant, but not actually applicable to me, because I made the transition seamlessly and I never noticed a transition. I just moved from pure entrepreneur to pure manager, but I was still pure an entrepreneur. I just made the transition to manager quite naturally, to running 12,000 people at one time.
Wow.
And it never occurred to me that anything was different, because I still had to apply entrepreneurial leadership, and I had to lead the people and motivate them and manage them and get them to replace me in many of the businesses, and it was very natural. But I think, to your point, there's not many people that seem to be able to do it. The entrepreneurs get to a point where they don't like it anymore and can't cope with it, or don't want to, and then they sell out. But that wasn't me. I was very happy with the transition.
Not only did you make the transition quite easy, but you moved into a marketplace which is very fast moving. So selling cars, it's not as fast moving as telecoms and mobiles.
Nowhere near.
And of course you're dealing with a global market, you're dealing with global players, you're dealing with big manufacturers, and they're selling, then you're selling to. Was that a hell of a shift from almost a static market to one that was completely needing you to be completely nimble? And of course, was that easy making that transition, or was it just again the same basic principles of business from there to there?
Well, you're right, it was completely different, and what I'm doing now is completely different, because it's property. So I've gone from, cars were not that slow moving, but compared to mobile, they were virtually static. I'm now in a very slow industry, which is building, developing, and that is very slow. There's no less skill, it's just different aspects, different things to think about. But the mobile phone business was ferocious, utterly ferocious, utterly cutthroat, and it was utterly ruthless behaviour, as you read in the book, by my suppliers. My biggest risk was not my competitors, it definitely wasn't sales and my customers, it was my suppliers. The very people that you would expect to be nurturing you to do the best, hated me becoming too powerful and too big, and then wanted to clip me and cut me. And so I had this huge extra stress and pressure of trying to keep my suppliers on side, and they had entirely, as you've read, my future in the palm of their hands. And that could be in the palm of one man's hands and one man's decision of what he was going to do to me. So, you know, it was on the edge of your seat. But I just think I just very naturally take to business. You know, it doesn't matter what the business. And I've always said, whatever business you put me in, I can make it way, way better. I'm not sure that applies to something that's too technological, like IT, software. I'm not very, even in spite of being an engineer, I'm not very IT. I wouldn't know where to start to design a program and to have that program written. And, you know, it's not, I think I'm a bit old world now. You know, I think the world's left me behind. So, but anything that resembles a normal type of business or a commercial business, I believe I can transform quite quickly if it's suffering.
Is that because you have, and there's this saying, isn't it? You have common sense. You see a problem. And entrepreneurs are renowned for being entrepreneurs because they don't see a problem, they go looking for solutions. And in the book you talked about the big supplier.
Do you know there's nearly always a solution?
Yeah.
Nearly always in life. People say that it's bad luck. I don't accept that. Now, I'm not saying there's never bad luck, because there'll be people who listen to this and think, that happened to me. Nobody could have done anything about that. And it is true in some cases. But bad luck is what comes your way every day of the week. And it's there just as a challenge. It's not really bad luck, it's just a challenge. It's just what happens in business. And you've got to deal with it. And 9 times, well, I was going to say 9 times out of 10 is a solution. I think it's probably way more than that. I think it's probably more like 30 or 40. Well, no, what percentage? I would say it's probably 90% of the time there's a solution. 90%. But there are the odd situation where no matter how smart you are, how savvy you are, how hard you work, there might not be a solution. And you know, that's very sad for those businesses, but that is also sort of evolution, because nothing lasts forever, and we all suffer a cycle of life, and business is a cycle as well. And some businesses will prosper for 10, 20, 30 years, and then things will go right the way off and the sell-by dates come. And I think that's part of the skill of a business as well. If you think the sell-by date is approaching, get it sold before you get there. Take yourself out and crystallize your wealth before it's too late.
It was interesting when I read the bit about the Motorola, when they said, well, actually, we're going to set your place. Yeah. But interesting, what you did there was what a lot of people did or didn't do in COVID, was to go looking for solutions. And you know, you went for it and you said, well, hold on, I want to find a solution. And you did find a solution, and you got knocked it off the ground from 1% to 20%. So one of the things I always say to people, listen to people like John, because he'll say to you, yes, there are challenges. And I remember you saying somewhere, I can't remember a day going without there being a challenge of some sort. And that really, if you can change your mindset to solution-based,
absolutely,
rather than problem-focused, you'll go a long way. And a lot of people didn't do what you did when COVID hit them. They went into problem and not focused. Interesting, you fly, so you've got a turnover of 13 million. You turn to your team and say, we're consolidating. Puzzled looks, what does that mean? Then you said something a lot of entrepreneurs and business people forget, is that if you want to scale, and this is what you said, you need systems and processes and an infrastructure. So for those who still can't understand, why is that important? Because you took a step of holding everything back until systems and processes in place. Why was that so important that you are happy to lose the momentum to get that done first? Why is that important?
Well, we were under the most immense pressure because I'd grown the business in the space of a year from nothing to 13 million.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound that much now, but in terms of percentage terms, it's a colossal percentage. I mean, we've grown it by probably 1,200%. We've grown it with no people, hardly any infrastructure. And what happened was we went from me selling phones out of the storeroom, people bringing cash in. They've got to bring a banker's draft or cash because I wouldn't give credit. I'd count the money, there's the money. I would go to the stores, count the phones, give them the phones. That was my system. Foolproof. I was in total control of my own stock, of my own money. We went from that to 13 million in the space, no time at all, by me driving sales like mad all over the UK. And of course what happened is everything fell apart. We'd get the orders wrong, we'd send somebody too few phones, they'd ring up, you've got your order up, can you send me some more because you've done it wrong? We'd then send somebody else too many phones. Of course they never round up to send me too many phones, so we lost those. And also then we were so incompetent that what happened is, I'm sure, people would get the right order and they'd ring up and say, oh, you've sent me too few phones, because they'd know we were very, very poor at the operations and administration. In spite of all that, because we were so dynamic and grown so furiously, and in addition to which I kept the overhead absolutely locked down. The overheads were wafer thin. And so in spite of those mistakes, we still made a reasonably healthy profit. And also I was doing a really great job on the buying front. We bought the phones very, very cheaply, so it gave us that margin. But we couldn't go on like that. There was no future in it. So I had the whole workforce together. I can't remember how many people were at that time, probably 20, maybe, something like 20 people. And I got them together and I said, look, this can't go on, we're going to fix this. So next year, we're going to put all our focus on systems, operations, administration, get everything right so that we've got a really solid platform to spring forward. Now that's quite a negative message. I then softened it with a sort of okay message, which is to say, in spite of not growing, we will be just as profitable or even more, because we won't have these losses where we're getting the orders wrong. And we're going to get everything slick, efficient and effective. And that will keep the profits at where we need them to be. I said, but furthermore, in 5 years' time, we're going to turn over £250 million. And they all looked at me as I was crazy. Because I'd given them the negative message. They all knew we were falling over. They all knew what a mess we were in. So that was no shock. Maintaining the profit while consolidating the business, that was perhaps a bit of a challenge in their minds. But then I hit them with the blockbuster that we were going to grow the business to 250 million in 5 years. And they just looked at me incredulously. And I told them, we will do it. We will absolutely do that. So let's get to work, go to it, get this operation administration working properly, and then we'll press the button and go for a massive expansion again. And that's what we did, and we grew. We got the target within 3 years.
Wow. I remember I'm reading somewhere early in one of the chapters when you just set up the phones bit and it wasn't doing what it should be doing, and then you said to your brother, you concentrate on the garage, I'll go over to the sales bit, and you set some targets and you were the top performer. Do you think it's important, because they don't teach that in schools, do you think to be really successful as an entrepreneur or as a business, skills is important? Having that sales skill to be able to sell, is that as important today as it was then, the ability to sell?
Well, of course, it does depend what business you're in. But if we're talking about this type of business, I think as an entrepreneur setting up your business, you've really got to be skilled in every area. Sales, marketing, finance, operations, administration. And I was skilled in all areas, more skilled than some than others. But I was skilled in all areas, so I could control the whole thing. I was very prudent as a financial manager, extremely prudent as a financial manager, which always kept me safe. But what you've got to do then is you've got to recruit people that are the very, very best that you can find in each area, who've got a greater skill than your own.
Is that quite difficult? Because you know your business better than anyone else, so it's finding someone as good or better than you is quite
Well, it depends how good you are. If you're not very good, you've still got to have the same target. It's just easier to achieve it.
Yeah.
But then you're not going to grow as fast because you're starting from a lower benchmark.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just lucky that I was very competent in all areas, but also very critical and understood crystal clear the type of people I needed and what they'd got to achieve. And I was a very hard manager. I've already talked about fairness. I always aimed to be fair. And if you said, were you always fair? I'd say no. There would be times out of stress, pressure, ambition, where I'd be too hard on somebody, expect too much too soon. But if you said, well, did you make the opposite mistake of being too soft? I'd say yes as well. I put up with people too long who I thought I needed, who were not really doing a very good job, and I kept. So I was sometimes too hard, and that would be unfair. Other times too soft, and that was just stupid for myself. But none of us are perfect. We all make these mistakes. But my goal was always to be fair, but always hard, demanding, driven. I didn't want people who were 9 till 5ers. I didn't want people.
That was an interesting observation you made in the book, that when you got to the telecoms bit, they all disappeared at 5. And you thought,
Yeah.
well, hold on, we haven't. And that was quite a revelation for you.
And when we were losing 2,000 a month, I just moved in that day, and at 5 o'clock or 10 to 5, they're all putting their coats on.
That's right.
And I think, oh, we've made profit already, have we? And I was a bit sarcastic about it. I didn't sort of, I wasn't aggressive with them. I just said, oh, we've all hit quota. We've sold. We've doing okay. Oh no, but it's 5 o'clock. Oh, so success doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is being 9 till 5. The next day they weren't so keen to go home at 5 o'clock, and the next day it was less. And by the time I'd done, I'd got people, not necessarily those same people, although there was one person in particular that did really change dramatically, and was rewarded appropriately, had the success that was appropriate to that change. But the new people coming in, I was looking for winners. I'd inherited these people from my previous manager who resigned. But after that, I was doing the recruiting. I was looking for winners. I never wanted anybody that was a 9 till 5. The people that talk about balance of life, work-life balance, that's fine and it's perfectly okay. And there's no reason why people shouldn't have that aim. But I didn't want to employ them. I wanted to employ people who want to win. And to win, you do what's necessary. And to do what's necessary is never 9 till 5. It's never 9 till 5. I wish I could have ever had 9 till 5. I couldn't. And I managed to collect hundreds, thousands of people around me that never thought 9 till 5. They thought, we're here to win. We're here to be number one in the mobile telecoms space, and we are here to win. And some I'm glad to send home, because I had one guy, he's still in touch with me now. He'd be in at 6 a.m. in the morning, and he'd still be there at 11 o'clock at night. And I'd said, look, you can't do those. He said, I'm happy, I'm doing it. But the trouble is, he also expected it of his own workforce. He was a manager, and he expected his people. And I said, you can't expect that. You can expect them to perform, expect them to be dedicated, but you can't expect preposterous hours. You've got to be reasonable. People, even the people that are not so bothered about work-life balance, do need a life. They need a home life. Otherwise they're going to get stale and really fed up with it. And it took me a lot of coaching with him, but he was just so desperate to succeed and win.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I was just going to ask you about life-work balance, but
I've covered it.
You just covered it.
Yeah.
So let me, a couple of things really. Going back to the Motorola thing, when they dropped that bombshell, and if I then combine it with your comment that actually every day is a challenge, you must have amazing levels of resilience. I mean, that, again, are you born with that kind of level of resilience?
Yeah, it's just luck. It's luck. I mean, various people in my life, wives, people that know me very well, just say I'm a robot. I'm an autonomic, autonomic or autonomic. I don't know. I've forgotten the word, but I haven't got very good memory.
No, we know what you're saying.
But I'm just robotic, and I'm not robotic, but robotic in terms of stamina. I do get tired now, and I always did get tired, but mentally I'd fight through the tiredness, and I wouldn't let the tiredness affect me. It might show, but it wouldn't affect my judgment, it wouldn't affect my mental health, and it wouldn't affect my physical health. So I was just very, very, very lucky, because I did have to work immense hours.
Yeah, so the hours
at
were ridiculous
times,
you were doing.
and sometimes immense stress. When Motorola's ceased my distribution, it was 95% of my business disappeared at the stroke of a pen. Gone. 95%. All I could see was bankruptcy, my mother losing her house because she had financed a house for me to help finance the business.
Yeah.
All the employees being thrown out of work. Complete and utter failure. That's all. That's the picture. That was the only picture. So what's the answer? And I didn't just hit on the answer in a split second. I mean, the first thing that happened was it hit me like a ton of bricks. I went home and I didn't sleep, and my brain was spinning all night, thinking, what do I do? Came into the office the next morning with ideas. Started putting the ideas into practice. The idea of buying from the service providers, which is what I did, instead of what I did in the early stages to succeed, which was selling to them, I started buying off them. And I bought Motorola product, and I bought it cheaper from them than I was buying it from Motorola.
Opportunity.
So that, but it was a short-lived, potentially short-lived thing, because Motorola could cut their supply off. They could manipulate the service providers and stop them selling to me. So I knew I was still on the edge of a precipice, but the more long burn was getting Nokia, winning Nokia on side at a time when they were just about ready to think about expansion. And that worked like a dream, because I had a great relationship with Nokia. I was their star. Well, as I say, I went from, as you said, we went from 1%, Nokia went from 1% market share to 20% market share in a year, all done by me. So I was their hero for a while, well, for quite a long time actually, but at the same time I was still selling huge amounts of Motorola. So I turned what was a complete and utter fiasco into even better financial result, even greater growth. So, we came good out of it. And it's times like that when your resilience is crucial, because some people would go home and cry. I was pretty stressed, I have to tell you. I was devastated, and my wife knew I was devastated. It was a dreadful, dreadful time. But
and did your kids offer their pocket money again?
They didn't know. It was too devastating for them to find out. I didn't tell people. I didn't tell anybody because, I was worried that all the employees would bail out on me because the writing's on the wall. But I so quickly managed to find solutions that before the employees got demoralised and left me, I'd found solutions and implemented the solutions, and we were better off than ever. So, it sort of worked.
It's interesting, John. So I did a podcast, Danish Damaging, e-bookers, and his personal stake in the business was around 800 million, and then 9/11 happened, and the stocks just plummeted, and I said, how did you cope with that? He lost 700 million overnight. Okay, it's paper value, but still, And everything you're saying reminds me of what he said, which was, you just get up in the morning, you get up and just go for it, you find solutions, you find a way around it, and you can't look at the bleak side is there, but you just go for it. And it's focused, and you drive everybody with you. And when I talked to Narinder, he just said, you've just got to put the work in, almost a bit like, you're just going to keep going. And I wouldn't say it's habit, but you're so engineered and so
I'll tell you what a lot of people say.
Yeah.
They say work smart, not hard.
Yeah.
Well, it's nonsense. It's a complete nonsense. The answer is work hard, work smart, and work long hours. That's what gets you to the top. Now, just bringing a balance to that statement, I'm not saying everybody should do that.
Yeah.
If you can run a business and you can run it 9 till 5, and you don't have to work hard, and it satisfies you from a living point of view,
Lifestyle.
it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
It's not that you're lazy or whatever, it's just that's what you've chosen as your lifestyle. But if you want to really win, whatever win means, if you really want to win, you've just got to be prepared to work long hours, work hard intensively and work smart. And if you can't do all three of those, then don't think about being a leader, a big leader. I mean, just run your business and keep it safe. But I tell you, the trouble with that is a safe business that just tootles along might be safe for a year, maybe safe for 5 years or 10 years. Sooner or later, an ill wind, the market changes, or the economic environment changes like it is now. Lots of people listening to this are going to be under threat business-wise, I'm afraid, over the next year or two, because we've got high inflation, we've got high interest rates, and a very difficult economic environment. So there's going to be a lot of stress out there on businesses, and you've just got to pull your finger out and get on with it.
What I think you've said so far is what any world-class athlete would say to you.
Yeah.
That's exactly
It's
what
the same.
They're exactly the same. That's what they say. You've just talked about inflation, you talked about interest rates, you talked about impending recession, possibly the cost of living. Do you think, somebody who understands the business landscape really well, do you think it's harder to set up a business today? A young teenager asked me this. Or do you think is it harder or easier than when you set up? Do you think in this macro environment as well?
Well, generally much easier. Much easier to make a fortune.
Yeah.
Because you've got .com.
Yeah.
And if you can hit on the right product.com, whether it's a bit of social application or all the software packages you could create, just software alone that you could create, all those opportunities, all the commercial applications that are worldwide, and you've got the whole world at your fingertips.
Yeah.
And you start off with something small, and it can be built into billions and billions and billions. You could never do that in my day. My day, it was hard-headed commercialism, and it was normal business. And if I were now a 20-year-old, I'd be so excited about the opportunities there. I've no idea what I would do, but I do know it would be .com. It would be on the internet, in some manner, commercially, enterprise, software development, whatever it was, but it would be worldwide application. And very exciting, because you can absolutely fly to the moon today. You couldn't do that back then. So yeah, I think it's very exciting, very exciting. And I'm a bit jealous that at my age I'm not really into doing that anymore, and that the youngsters can do it.
They can fast track.
And they can have a fantastic time doing it.
I've never heard the word unicorns until the internet age came. Now it's a unicorn. Now, for someone who did so well on the high street, now you've just talked about the Internet of Things, and the two sometimes don't go together. And as someone who made the high street a place to go, the way you sold phones, is the high street finished, do you think?
Not finished, but difficult. Right from the beginning in Phones for You, as soon as the internet came into place, we introduced an online business. It was very unsophisticated. It was really ordering online, but everything fulfilled manually. It was a very clunky version because nothing was developed. And it was a tiny part of the sales. But what I knew right from the beginning, and when I say right from the beginning, maybe the internet had been going a few years, so it wasn't I don't think I visualised it on day one of the internet, but certainly within a few small number of years, I knew what was going to happen. And what was going to happen was a evolution towards online sales away from the high street. So the high street was always doomed to a reduction in sales. Now, you might then say, well, why on earth did you build all those shops then? And the reason I built all those shops was for branding, but also because I knew I could make them profitable in the short, medium term. But I knew also they would come under threat in the long term. So you're building the shops, building the brand, but you're building the online at the same time. And what you hope is that by the time shops are really passé, that your online business is completely taken over, and then you've just got your leases to sort out and so on. And there'd always be some of those shops that were immensely successful still. So you've got to plan your business for where the environment's going. But what actually happened, and not to Phones for You, because the Phones for You died in 2014 as a result of what I call network collusion. But if you look at what happened, the pandemic turned that evolution of the internet into a revolution. And all of a sudden the likes of Amazon went through the roof, and the poor old retailers really, really suffered. And at the time I called for a wealth tax, a special windfall wealth tax on the people that had benefited out of that situation, and to then use that to compensate the big losers. And that to me seemed completely fair, but government never took it up. Now, just finishing that, I do understand why, because we have to be very, very careful as a society in Britain that we're not seeing that if somebody has a great success, that we think, oh, we'll have some of that money off them and spread it round to the poorer people. We can't be seen to be anti-capitalistic in that way and to make rash decisions. But I think the pandemic was a very, very unique situation where you could say, look, it's only fair that some of the windfall profits you've made, which is as a result of us shutting the economy down, that we take some of that off you and spread it amongst the people who have really suffered. It's only a one-off, we're not going to do it again, but it's a one-off as a consequence of the pandemic.
We'll move quickly up because we're getting quite close to the finish. You talk about distribution of wealth there, and we've got to be careful that we don't seem to be taxing the wealth creators. Without going too much into politics, obviously the Tory party set out to level up. And you come from Stoke-on-Trent, and you know the area well. I know the area well because I come from the Midlands, and I go to the potteries quite often. How important do you think, back to your dream about throwing the fivers out to the community, how important is it for entrepreneurs to shout it about levelling up? Or should as entrepreneurs not really care? It's not our problem, let the politicians sort it out. Or is it really important? Know the importance of place?
I think it's a good question, but you know, my entire business was built in Stoke-on-Trent.
Yeah.
So the opportunity was there if you wanted to take it. You know, if you're smart enough to take it, it was there.
Yeah.
So I built my huge business centred in Stoke-on-Trent. Most of my employees were in Stoke-on-Trent. So do we really need to level up? Well, I think the answer is yes, because Stoke-on-Trent is a depressed city like lots of northern cities, and they need help. You know, it's up to businessmen to do their job, but they need help and inspiration in those areas to bring them up. You know, Stoke itself as a town centre is almost derelict. You know, it's very sad to see. It really needs substantial financial help from the government. So I think levelling up is important because we don't want everybody migrating into London.
That's right.
We don't want everything to be in London. There's a quality of life in other cities and a culture in other cities that people would say is way nicer than the London culture. I mean, when my suppliers who've never been to Stoke-on-Trent, I always operated from my office in Stoke-on-Trent. So they all had to come up there. And you know what they all said? Wow, the Stoke-on-Trent people are very friendly.
They are nice people.
And that's what they said, they're nice people, they're friendly, they're salt of the earth. You don't want to lose that. You don't want all those Stoke-on-Trent people to have to come to London to make a living. So I think it is important that we level up the UK as much as possible. It can never be totally level because, although there's poor parts of London as well, isn't it? You know, I mean, London in a way needs levelling up as well.
London needs levelling up
within itself. Yeah. So I think we have to recognise where parts of the country need help, whether it's London or the North, and where we can leave it to get on with its own success. But I have the same feeling about rich-poor divide. We do need a levelling up of that, but that's impossible. It's an impossible challenge. It's a really difficult challenge. And then you can take it further that we need a levelling up between very, very wealthy Western countries and the poverty-stricken, starving people of places like Africa. So, you know, the world's a very unbalanced place, and I find it a little bit unpalatable, but at the same time, in case your listeners think I'm a soppy socialist, I'm not. I'm pure capitalist, but with a heart that doesn't want to see people suffer.
Before we finish on where the proceeds are going, I just want to ask one last question, because you managed to do a lot of people like to do but never get to do it successfully. If you could just advise or give some insights into exiting, why did you decide to exit? And we talked about systems and processes way back, and that's quite an essential part of it. Why did you exit, and was it quite easy to exit? What did you have to do to make that more seamless than it could have been?
Well, the answer to that is very long, but I'll try and keep it concise. The answer, first of all, is no, it wasn't easy for us to exit at all.
Okay.
Extremely difficult. Now, the first thing was to make sure every bit of the management structure was successful. And I started grooming it in 2002. I started grooming in 2002 because I saw mobile phones coming to a real consolidation period, because there was a saturation beginning to take place, 70% of the population and 80%, but so I thought, well, there is definitely going to be some winners and some losers out of this, or maybe only losers, and I don't want to be one of those losers. So that was a pressure that was beginning to become obvious to me. At the same time, I started forecasting a UK recession. And I was a bit early in my forecast for the UK recession. That was more about 2003 actually. But there was a lot of reasons. Everything was really inflated. The balloon looked ready to burst. It didn't burst until 2006.
That's right.
I know the actual crash, of course, was 2008, but that was slightly different.
That's right.
There were all the constituent parts becoming very obvious in 2006 of this balloon ready to pop. But I'd seen that a lot earlier, and I thought, I've got a double whammy here. I've got a country that's going to hit recession, and at the same time I've got an industry that's consolidating, and I figured that if I stuck with it, I might be working for the next 10 years longer just to maintain shareholder value or even lose it. So I decided it was time to go. I also wanted to fulfill that other part of my childhood dream with my charity. I couldn't do it while I got all my money tied up in the business, which I had, all of it, and while I was having to work flat out on the business. I hadn't got time properly to look at charity. I did do, because I founded Caudwell Children in 2000. Yeah. But, so there was multiple reasons. I felt I would like a bit more time with my family, and just have that luxury of spare time. I never got it, incidentally, but I did want it. So that was what led me to it, and it was a very, very difficult process. But the one thing that you've got to do when selling a business is be blasé about it, not really bothered if I do sell it. You've got to be strong and not stand any messing about by the people who are trying to buy it, because what they'll all do is they'll go into due diligence and they'll start chipping. The lawyer's job is to find reasons to chip, and they're always going to chip. And you've got to say from the beginning, I'm not going to have any chip, that's the price. Whatever you find in the due diligence, tough. If you don't like what you find, there's only one thing to do, walk away, because the price is not going to come down. And you've got to be tough, strong, and convict.
Back to your blasé, isn't it?
You've got to be, because if you're weak, they'll run you into the ground. They'll run you into, not everybody, some people are very reasonable and fair, but in principle they will. So you've got to be very, very careful. And of course, the lawyers are getting paid fortunes, and they've got to justify their existence. So they're always going to try and find ways of helping chip the price down, so they can say to the buyer, look what we've achieved, okay, it's a big bill you're paying, but look what we've achieved for you. So you've got to be strong.
So it's timing, preparation, and be really focused on your price, and just be
strong.
Confident and strong.
Be strong. Don't be desperate to sell. And I said that to my employees. I said, look, if they're going to mess us about, I'm happy to say this for the next 5-10 years. I wasn't. And then incidentally in my business, which was quite a big business, of course, I had to be very worried about the senior management going native, because on a buyout like that, they would be getting sweet equity. They were getting equity from me, but they were getting sweet equity from the buyer. It was very, very likely that they would try and help talk the price down in order to get the sweet equity at an even better price. So I had to be incredibly strong with all of those people.
Difficult.
Really difficult. I had to be almost I know.
Because that's an extra dimension. You don't think about it. It's an extra dimension.
I had to really be hard on them and say, and the slightest thing that they came back to me and said, I mean, they must have thought I was incredibly unreasonable, because anything that got fed back in the due diligence, I'd hit the wall. It was feigned anger. I'd hit the wall and say, that's just bloody preposterous. Tell them to go away. And then the employee wouldn't do that because they wanted the buyout, but they knew that I was not for being manipulated. Now, I don't know that they were manipulating me in every case, but they definitely would have been in some. And there is no doubt that they would have an eye on the prize. And the prize was a buyout where they get sweet equity.
Amazing. Now, so you did very well. You exited, you sold. Then you moved on to the second bit of the dream. And your mission, from what I can see by all the proceeds from this book, are going to your Caudwell children. And of course, your mission now is to persuade other wealth creators to join you on this journey, to give back to the community, whichever form that is, the wealth they've accumulated. I'm hearing percentages of 50, 70%. So tell me a bit about why you think wealth creators should now help in that distribution voluntarily. Why is that now so important to you?
Well, the rich-poor divide is the poor. I mean, if you take the richest Jeff Bezos and the poorest in somewhere like Somalia, where kids are just dying of starvation, I mean, it's just horrendous. Now, I am a full-blown capitalist, and Jeff Bezos has done an amazing job. Elon Musk, all those people. I have. We deserve the wealth that we've got because we've pulled out every stop and we've been smart and we've done the right things. But what about all those people that are really unfortunate? They're born with misfortune, born with ill health. We have to have a heart in order to have anything that resembles a fair humanitarian society. Now, my point is, to any rich people, why do you need all of that wealth? You can join the Giving Pledge and pledge 50% of your money to charity during or after your lifetime. You can still die a billionaire or a multi-billionaire because you don't have to do anything during your lifetime if you don't want to. Leave the money in a foundation, at least 50% of it, to your family to manage and the trustees to manage, to make other people's lives better and contribute to that. And do you think that if you leave your multi-billions to your children, they're going to be happier human beings? They won't need to work. They might fall foul of drugs or something. I don't know what they might do. I don't think it's going to make them happy. And my children I always brought up to be happy, whatever that means, and to leave the world a better place than they found it. And if part of that happiness is being wealthy and successful, great. If part of it is, as my middle daughter has become a psychotherapist, that makes her happy helping other people to. She can earn decent money out of it, never rich out of it, of course, but she can earn an okay living out of it. That's wonderful. I don't want them to emulate me. Why should I? They need their own lives, their own satisfaction, their own successes. They don't need daddy's millions or billions to do that. They don't need it. It's not going to make them a happy person. So I say to the wealthy people, put it in a foundation and let your children have the pleasure of improving other people's lives with that money. You can still leave them very wealthy if you want to, because 50%, if you're a meager billionaire, 50% of a billion is still 500 million. For goodness sake, how much do you need to leave your kids? Of course, it's all personal choice, but that's my argument about it. And and people have to make their own choice, and I don't criticise them for it, but I don't really understand why they won't do what I'm doing. I don't understand it really. It's their personal choice, however.
John, it's been remarkable listening to you today. We haven't even touched upon some of the other challenges about like falling off a bike, and I won't even go there. I mean, that's worth reading, I think, in the chapter. And I think maybe it's a good thing we haven't spoken about quite a bit of stuff that gives people an incentive to read the book. And before we finish with how they can get hold of the book, 3 tips for anybody who wants to become an entrepreneur today from you, the...
Well, I think the first thing, if you're not already in business and you're a budding entrepreneur, measure the 6 critical success factors in yourself, really, with a real critical look at yourself. And the 6 critical success factors are ambition, which first of all sets the pathway of what you want to achieve in life. So it's ambition, drive. Can you really keep pushing through all the time? Push. Passion, which really adds to that, because passion, it motivates and incentivizes. You can push, but you have to show passion to people, because passion is what lights the other people up and lights people up to follow you. So ambition, drive, passion. But if you've got all of those things, what do you really need to hold it together? Well, that's resilience, which you touched on earlier. You need massive resilience to hold it all together. And those 4 qualities will make you successful. But to take the next step of success, it's commercial intellect. Commercial intellect is that ability to see arbitrage, to see opportunities, to turn things, commercial aspects in your favour all the time. Whether it be a negotiation, whether it be an arbitrage opportunity, whatever it is, turn it in your favour. That'll make you even more successful. But the one final piece then that you've got to have in order to really be at the top is leadership. The ability to lead people, motivate them, inspire them, drive them, and get them to be exactly what you want them to be in making your business become number 1.
What does success look like for you?
Now?
Yeah.
I have so many threads of success. You know, I want my One Mayfair development here in London to be seen as the most prestigious apartment block in the world. Certainly not the biggest, nowhere near, it's quite small, it's almost boutique. But I want it to be seen the most prestigious because of its location, because of the interior design and all the facilities, and because of the exterior architecture. All of that, with its location, I want to be seen as the most prestigious. That's my ambition. I believe I will succeed in that. If I don't, it'll be people who can nitpick and say, well, somewhere in Shanghai is better, or Monaco, but I believe I'll make it the best in the world because of the location and what I do. That's one ambition. I've got a Caudwell marine business that's producing the first successful, reliable diesel outboard motor, and we're nearly there with it. If we get there, it'll be a world beater. It'll sell in vast numbers and be a massively successful business. I've been doing it for 15 years. It's been a colossal labour of love, with iteration after iteration, failure after failure, million after million. But I believe we're nearly there. And if we don't get there, it'll be one of the biggest mistakes I've made, really. But it's not a mistake, because even if we don't get there, the fact is that if we did get there, it will be a huge business. So that I want to be a success. And of course, more than anything, I want to make a difference to the world. I want poor, disabled, disadvantaged people to have a better life. And on that, I've just founded another charity called Caudwell Youth.
Okay.
And Caudwell Youth is a charity I've just founded. Some people came to me with an idea of what they could do, and the idea is really very simple. There's a huge amount of at-risk young people out there from 11 to 25. They're at risk for crime, they're at risk for drugs, they're at risk for mental illness, and they're at risk for sexual slavery. But any risk to those young people. And what we do is, where we identify a young person at risk like that, we put a one-on-one mentor who's a volunteer, and that mentor has a small budget to take them out to the cinema or whatever, build a relationship with them. And if that young person's in any danger from any risk factor, they've got the mentor there who they trust, who they can have a conversation with. It's a level-headed person who they've got this relationship, they've got the trust in, and who will try and keep them on the right path. And up to yet, what we see and estimate is that if we don't not involve, 36% of those people will go wrong. If we're involved, only 1% will go wrong. The saving to society and crime and issues and costs is colossal, because the cost of one of these young people going wrong is maybe £300,000 a year on average. So we can save the government £300,000 a year. At the moment, it'll cost me maybe £12,000 a year, but we are turning it into, it's a proper charity. We will start getting support. I'll always put the money in for the basic operating and administrative expenses, but we'll raise money and we'll grow the charity and help more and more young people at risk. And that for me is another extremely exciting change that I can make to society. I can't change the world, I can't make a massive difference, but I can make the biggest difference that I can make.
John, it's been a brilliant hour spending with you, understanding what makes you tick, how you grew a business from nothing to a colossal power in the world of telecommunications. I think this is one of the best books I've ever read, John.
That's good to hear.
It's
really
fantastic.
good to hear.
There's some bits in there, you know. I mean, I did wonder, love, pain and money. I thought, hold on, the only thing I know about John is money. Where's the love and the pain coming? And I think when you read the book, actually, then you get a full picture of the love and pain. And this is available, I assume, on Amazon and
all major bookstores. Yeah,
so I strongly recommend John Caudwell, Love, Pain and Money, The Making of a Billionaire, an autobiography, and it really is a fantastic read. And once again, sir, thank you for your time, and continue to contribute to UK economy, both through your wealth creation and, just as importantly, what you do for children, the youth, and for society in general. Thank you very much, John.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you.